right, so welcome everyone. I'm quite happy to be able to share knowledge and content with you. I will definitely prefer to be in person with you, but for reasons we have to still do it online. Now we have about an hour or so of time to share, and please let me know whenever you have any questions. Ask them right away. We also will have time at the end, and so let's see how it goes. So I'm going to move these to another screen and click on the share so that I can share the screen and then now display the slides. So here we go. So this is me. I am Andres, and I love open source. I work a lot working in open source, and as Chaim said, I'm currently employed by Oracle. But the project that we're going to see today is completely open source on my side. It has nothing to do with my employer. So I'm going to give you just a little bit of information of background how the tool came to be, so that we're able to understand what it could potentially do for you. And then we're going to jump into how you may use it, how you can install it, and we'll see a light demo of the things that it can possibly do for you. Now, the tool itself lets you release any kind of project, whether it has binaries or no. But before I get into that, so just like yourself, I'm a developer and I like to write code. And one of the things that I like to do is create command line applications or utilities or even UI applications. In the past, I did it with Swing. Nowadays, I do it with JavaFX. So building the application is quite a straightforward task. And then once you're done, or once I'm done, the next bit is to push it somewhere so that the users can consume it. Now, from the point of view of a developer, it's very easy to say, I just build this thing, I create a jar or a zip file, and then boom, I put it in a particular web page, and the job is done. Someone will find it, the users will find it, and I just go back to writing code. Well, not really. Some users might find it, but it's likely that we're going to miss a lot of people. Because the users, what they prefer is to install binaries using their regular tools they already know, such as if you're like myself and you're using a Mac, then you probably would like to install binaries using Homebrew or a DMG or PackG file, or maybe Smartboards, or maybe something else. Maybe if you're on Windows, you might prefer to use Winget or Chocolate, or for Linux, then it's a Snapgraph or Flatpak, SDK Man. There are many different options. As a producer of a Java project, you can certainly talk to those platform package managers, but you have to learn the manifest files and the metadata that is required in order to create such files, such package managers. Now, the users would like to read information or get information about your project, such as release notes, what is new, what is broken, or in case there were any breaking changes, what else can you do with your application, where is the configuration files, all those things. Now that data can come directly from your project, and that can also be based on your source control. So there are many things that we have to think about when we want to release a project. And that was me. I didn't know exactly how to release a particular UI application. So I just kind of like put a pause on that particular project and start to look to other things as an inspiration. So as part of the things that I do, besides writing Java code, I also write Go code. And I wrote a small command line utility in Go. And I face the same problem. Once I have it, what do I do for my users? Do I tell them, here's the GitHub page, download the source, configure Go, build it, and then you have a binary for your system? That's not very user-friendly. So I discovered a project called JReleaser. Now, this particular project takes one single configuration file, one YAML file, and what it will do for you, you can calculate checksums for all the binaries that it produces. You can sign files, all these binaries, using PGP or cosine. You can create platform packages such as Homebrew and Snapgraph and Scoop and a few others. So this is great. This is what I wanted. And I use it for my command line application. And after my first release, I said, I want to have the same thing for Java, but there is no such tool like that. Almost at the same time, I got in touch with a friend of mine, Max Anderson, creator of the JBank CLI. This is a Java project. It's the best CLI tool that you can use in the Java space, besides JReleaser, obviously. And it allows you to have self-contained Java scripts. I'm not talking about JS, I'm talking about Java. And so it's kind of like a JShell script or a single source file with dependencies, and it's just figure it out. Max had the same idea. Find a way to deploy or package JBank so that as many users will be able to find it. And he did it especially for JBank using Gradle scripts and bash scripts and so many things. So one day he and I were talking, and he told me that he had to do a lot of things, to get JBank to work the way he wanted. And I said to him, well, I just did the same thing for my project called GUM using JReleaser, and it's just one configuration file. And then it dawned on us, what if there was a Java-based tool that could function like JReleaser, but for Java projects? What if that tool were able to learn from all the lessons taken from JBank? And that is exactly how JReleaser came to be. So what it is, you keep using the build tool that you use today. So whether it's Apache Ant or Apache Maven, Gradle, or what have you, and you supply one additional configuration file, the model of your project. And what JReleaser can do is create a Git release on GitHub or GitLab or Gitia. You can also create package managers based on the binaries, such as Homebrew, Scoop, Chocolati, Snapcraft, and others. And it can also announce a project or a release to many different distribution channels, such as Twitter, SDKman, Zulip, email, so many different options. Now, how does this work? The way that JReleaser does it is just one command. You say JReleaser build, and it performs everything in one go, every single step. Whereas JReleaser, if you want that one-stop shop, then invoke the full release command, which does everything for you. But early on in the development of the project, we saw that it would be a good idea if we can split all the different steps separate from one another, so that if you only want to create a Git release, then you can invoke the release column, the blue one. Or if you only care about platform packages, then just invoke prepare package publish. Or if you only care about announcing a project, then just use the green column, announce. Now, JReleaser expects your binaries to be built by your build tool of choice. But it can also assemble some of those binaries. So if you want to assemble a zip file based on any kind of files, then you can do it. You can also assemble cross-platform Java runtimes with JLink. You can also assemble GraalVM native executables using GraalVM native image. And you can create platform installers using JPackage as well. So you might build this with JReleaser, or you might use the other build tools or any other build or any other tool at your disposal to create such files. I already mentioned a few integrations, but here's a full list of everything that we can do. So you can release any project to GitHub, the open source version or enterprise. You can also release to GitLab, open source or enterprise, or Gitia, which means you're hosting your own instance of Gitia. Or you can also use Codeberg, which is a free hosting solution based on Gitia. If you happen to use any other Git service, we're talking about Bitbucket, Azure DevOps, or something else, then you can still tag the project, but you cannot release because we don't have yet an API integration with that particular service. That may be coming in the future. Besides releasing assets on a Git release, you can also post those assets or binaries to a JFrog Artifactory instance of your choice, whether it's private or public. You can also upload them to an HTTP or HTTPS server under your control, which as long as it accepts a post or a put operation, you're good to go. Or you can also upload to an Amazon S3 bucket, or it can be any cloud provider as long as they have an S3 compatibility layer. In terms of platform packages, Homebrew works for Mac and Linux, Chocolati is for Windows. We can build Docker images. Goldfish works on the 3 major platforms, so Windows, Linux, and Mac. JBank has an option for downloading and launching jars across the network. MacBooks works for Mac. Well, JBank works on all platforms because of Java. Scope is like Homebrew, but for Windows. SCCommand works on all platforms. Snapcraft works on Linux, and Spec is like building RPMs based on Fedora Copper build service. And then you can announce that to many different distribution channels. So I already mentioned Twitter, but you can also send it to Discord or Mastodon. Or if the choice that you're using is not listed here, but it does accept incoming webhooks, then you may use the webhooks integration. Any questions so far? I think there might be a question in the chat, or no? Oh, I see. So in terms of the inputs, the things that you built, you provide a zip file or a tar file that contains the binaries. So typically there is a structure that you need to follow. It's a bin directory with the executable or the launcher script, and a lib directory that contains the jar files, or maybe there's a config that contains configuration files, or any other supporting files for the application to run. And Gradle and Maven have plugins that can create a distribution file with the correct structure. Another popular option for distributing Java applications is using overjar. It's just a single jar that contains all dependencies and it's executable, so we support that as well. Because JReleaser assembles JLink and GraalVM and native images, we also support this kind of distributions, but you may assemble them from outside as well. And finally, native package is the distributions that you can assemble with JPackage. Now, when I say binary distributions, so far we're talking about just Java. But let me say that JReleaser also accepts any kind of binaries as long as they follow the file structure. So you can release Rust binaries or C++ or Perl or Python as long as they follow the same structure. There is an example out there. There's actually one project already out there that uses JReleaser and is built with Rust, uses cross-compilation to release 5 of 6 different binaries and builds everything with GitHub. So how do you launch these things? And then after this, we go into the demo. Well, it depends. Depends on the platform of your choice. If you're on the Mac, then you have all these different choices. You have different installers that you can use. SDKman is my preferred way, but you have a few others. And if any of these were not good enough for you for whatever reason, you can go into the release page and download a zip file, which you have 2 choices. If you download JReleaser and the latest version, then you need a Java runtime installed on your machine. Java.IL is fine. Or if you use a standalone version, then this is a zip file that bundles a Java runtime built with JLink. So you don't need an existing Java runtime. The bundle will give it to you. For Linux, we have almost the same options in terms of installers, plus Fedora Copper, of course. And there are 2 variations of the standalone distribution. One is that doesn't have any classifiers, just Linux. This is for platforms that run on glibc, typically Ubuntu. And the other one, Muscle, are for platforms that have been compiled using Muscle. In this case, will be Linux Alpine. And finally, on Windows, a bunch of installers that you can use, or once again, you can download a zip file or a zip file that contains the bundled JRE. You may also launch JReleaser via Docker images. So we have provide 2 versions. The first one is for Ubuntu, and the second one is based on Linux Alpine. So now the question may be, so JReleaser is a CLI tool, and JReleaser is a project for releasing projects. Does JReleaser release itself? And the answer is yes, since the first release. As a matter of fact, it's not just the final releases. We have a setup so that every time that we push to the main branch, then a new early access or a snapshot release is posted. So we have rolling releases for early access. It's very easy to test out the latest features before waiting for the next final release to come out. And so far, I just discussed all the options that you can use to run the tool as a CLI.
Question.
Yes, go ahead.
Why is using SDK man is better than brew, for example?
It's not necessarily that it's better, it's my preference, because SDK man is much lighter than other platforms. Brew requires not just updating the formula that you want to use, but any other formula that you may be installed. So from time to time, you need to update all the formulas to figure out if there is a new versions for the tools that you have installed. Whereas SDK man will tell you there might be updates, but does not perform the update unless you tell it to do so.
So in terms of how much time it takes to update?
Yes.
Like I brew update and I wait for 5 minutes until it resolve everything.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's the reason why I prefer to use SDK man.
Okay.
And then, so far we have seen all the options to run this as a CLI tool. But you can also run it as a Maven plugin or as a Gradle plugin or as a set of tasks. So we covered a wide spectrum of different choices for you to use the tool. You can also run it on a CI/CD platform. We have guides for all these different services. There's 14 different services. We have a custom GitHub action that you can use on GitHub. And our Docker image is also aware of the specifics for running inside GitLab CI. So there's no need to create yet another Docker image to run JReleaser on GitLab CI. Just use the one that we provide, and that should be good enough to get us started. So let's do the demo. Now, I'm going to start with something very, very simple, and then we grow and we add a little few other features. So what I have here is just a regular project. It happens to be Maven-based, and it happens to create a binary. It's a CLI tool that prints out hello world. That's it. But what I'm going to do first is create a release without any binaries. So notice that here, there are no releases, and there are no tags. So I have this code checked out here locally on my machine, and it's found right there. Notice there is no target directory, there are no binaries. I'm going to ask JReleaser, SDK man, to list the versions of JReleaser that we currently have at our disposal. And these are all the versions that currently released. Latest release posted last Sunday, February 13, and currently working on the latest snapshot. So we're going to use this one. Okay, let's ask JReleaser for its version. And it says should be 100M2. Good. We're also going to ask JReleaser for its the set of commands that we can use. And you might recall that some of these names match the names that we saw in the diagram, each one of the steps. So at the top of the diagram, there was full release. And for now, we're going to invoke release. So we can say JReleaser release and give me the help for that one. And we get a bunch of options that we can invoke in our release. But the important bit will be this option says autoconfig. We can pass other features as well. So I'm going to use autoconfig. What does that mean? That I'm going to ask JReleaser to read information about the Git metadata. So we have a project hosted here, right? And there is a Git directory. And from there, we can find the remote, we can have the repository name, the owner, the branch, see all the things that we can just read automatically. Notice that my shell, my specific shell also lists what is the current branch and the name of the remote. And if there were any tags, it will appear here as well. So let's do JReleaser release and say autoconfig. And the next thing I need to tell it also is which version I want to release. So I can pass that as an environmental variable, or I can pass it as a property here or as a flag here. I'm going to say 100 like this. Okay. Now, releasing to GitHub requires a token or credentials. I could define those in environmental settings, an environmental variable, or I can define it in a secrets file where I can store all my secrets and all the tokens. So that file you'll see in that moment with the location, but of course I'm not going to show the contents. So here we go. And what we see here at the beginning is that it's trying to load variables from this particular file right here, config.toml. There are 4 formats: toml, JSON, YAML, and properties. I chose to go with toml just because. And here are my tokens. And JReleaser gives me some metadata about my project. So what is the current time in Switzerland? Which platform I'm using to release. I'm going to release for real. So dry run is set to false. That means I'm going to create a release. And here's the changelog, which JReleaser calculated for me based on all the commits. It's just a list of all commits in sequential order. And it posted the release to this URL, which happens to be the page that we click here. So we do a refresh. And notice that now there's one tag and there's a release. So we click that one. And by convention, we use the same tag, but of course you can change the title, you can change the content, and that's what it does. Good. So I just created a release on my local machine on a remote GitHub repository. We can do better than that. Say, for example, we can start adding formatting to the changelog. So this is where when we do JReleaser release and do help again, we see all the different options that we have at our disposal. We can reach each one of those, but what I'm looking for is this one. I'm going to format the changelog. So let's copy that one and issue the same command as before, this, and issue the release, and this is going to fail. And the reason it's going to fail is because I already have that release. I already have release 100. And unless I say overwrite equals true, then JReleaser is not going to drop and delete and recreate the release. I have to be explicit. Another thing that I could do is just keep the existing release, but maybe update the title or the body or append new assets. In my case, I really want to overwrite. So let's do that. Overwrite, and this time it's going to work. And just takes a few moments. You see it is saying something like calculating checksums, and there's nothing, calculating signing, but there's nothing because we don't have any input files. So when I go here and do a refresh, notice that the changelog starts to look a little bit different. And if we look at all these commit messages, they have a particular prefix. This is a convention that you can apply to your project. You can apply any kind of conventions. So if we follow these kind of prefixes, perhaps we can apply categories. So we put things like these are features, and these are fixes, and these are tasks, and these are translation, whatever, what have you. And right now we still also have no assets. We're not uploading any binaries. Let's do that. Remember that this is a Maven project. So let's build Maven. Let's see what happens here. And we will get two binaries, a zip file and a tar file right there. Just because that's how Maven is configured for this project. So there are the two files. All right. So we can issue the same command as before. And now we can add files that should be in target distributions app, the zip file, and another file, target distributions app, the targc. And when we do a release, notice that now it's calculating checksums. I didn't configure signing, so it skipped signing. And we got the two binary assets now added to the release and all the checksums that were calculated. Of course, the algorithm could be something else. You can have as many algorithms as you want to. But now that we do a refresh here, the changelog stays the same, but notice now we have assets. So that's pretty good. And we can keep adding more features in the command line. But of course, if you get a very big command line, it's going to get difficult to figure out where this goes or goes there. So that's why we have a configuration file that you can see here, JReleaser YAML. So what this file has is a section that says metadata about your project, such as what is the name of the project, what is the current version, description, authors, license, blah, 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 you name it. Right now, the version does not appear here. That's important. We also have the release section when we say we definitely want to release to GitHub and we want to overwrite, so drop and create it once again if we match an existing release. We want to sign tags and commits that were to be happen by JReleaser. We also want to link the release to a discussion. If you have discussions enabled on the project, it will be posted on the announcement category. And what we see here is just instructions to format the changelog based on the conventions that we set. So if we find a commit that starts with this prefix, and we're going to apply a label, and based on labels, we can categorize. And there are so many things. You can do things very, very big if you want to. And there are other ways based on conventions, such as conventional commits or Gitmoji, where you just apply one line and it applies all the different conventions for you. Moreover, we're going to create signatures for the binaries. We're also going to create a Homebrew formula for these binaries. And here's the list of binaries. You may notice this. It's kind of like a placeholder. It looks like a variable. These are actually mustache templates. And these values will come from somewhere else in the file. For example, distribution name matches this value here, app. And project version will match whatever project version we decide to apply to this project. Okay. So
I have a question.
Yes.
Do you support in GitHub? There is a GitHub application for releasing, for draft release. I think it's called JReleaser. Do you know it?
JReleaser. As a matter of fact, the changelog configuration that you see here is inspired by JReleaser. Now, JReleaser works with looking at labels, issues, and PRs, whereas JReleaser works looking at commit messages. In the future, we may add integration to JReleaser to also be able to look and inspect into issues and PRs.
You don't think it looks at the commit?
JReleaser does not look at commit messages, as far as I understand.
Because I think whenever you commit, it creates like a GitHub action that updates the release, the draft release.
Yes.
I think the biggest advantage of using it is that you can see what's coming up.
Yes.
I mean, for a user, that's like the biggest advantage, I think.
Yeah, so JReleaser can give you kind of like that if you run it locally. So when I show that I display the changelog file, you can also configure JReleaser to create a draft release with the current set of changelog instructions, so you can see what's going on, which is exactly what JReleaser does. It creates a release in draft and it continues to update the changelog or the body of the release whenever there are new commits or new PRs being merged into the branch that you have set up as default.
Okay.
One more thing that I didn't show. Yeah, here we have a local tag which matches the remote tag. So that's my shell showing that. So now we're good to invoke a release here, and we do JReleaser full release, and I'm pretty sure this is going to fail because we have not defined the project version. We could have defined the project version in the model, or we can set it as an environmental variable. If we do that, then your configuration file will be more stable, and then you just have to define the version number, or you can just put it in the configuration file. It's up to you. If you happen to use Maven plugin or the Gradle plugin, then the project version is read directly from the usual place where Maven or Gradle define that version. So let's define that property. Let's say 100, and we can invoke a full release. So this, we're going to create a release and create a Homebrew formula. So here we go, calculates the checksums. Notice that now it's signing the checksums and the binaries, uploads 6 different assets, binaries, checksums, and the 3 signatures, and creates a Homebrew formula in this particular repository. If you did not have this repository before, then it will be created automatically for you. And because we did not configure any announcers, then the announcer is skipped. But what happens here when we do a refresh? Wow, the changelog looks different. In a way, similar to what you could do with JReleaser, except that in this case works with commit messages. Gone are the prefixes because that's part of the configuration that we add. What else do we find? The link to the user and all the assets. And what about the Homebrew formula? Well, here's in there this repository that has been updated just a moment ago. And this is based on a template that you can change. So this is the URL for the release that we just posted. and that matches the checksum. And of course, you can change as much as you want this particular template with different settings. And we can continue adding more features. You can add more binaries. You can change the changelog. There are so many other things that you can do. But of course, so far, I'm only showing GitHub. But what about GitLab? So here's the same project, same sources. So let's go into the GitLab directory where I have the same project. So I can do build. This will create the binaries. And then I can show you the model, which is pretty much identical to the one on GitHub, except for 2 changes. I'm going to release to GitLab, and there are no GitHub discussions because that's a GitHub only feature. Everything else is exactly the same, okay? Which means that I can run the same command as before, JReleaser full release. And this, again, calculates checksums, calculates the signatures, uploads all the assets to a particular release, and we'll create a Homebrew formula. Now, I'm doing the same, I'm using the same model, pretty much the same model within 2 different services. And I'm doing things locally. The only thing that I need is a GitLab token that I can talk to the remote GitLab service. So when I go back here, do a refresh, and now there is a tag. Click on the tag and click on the release. There are the assets, and there are the changelog. And I go into the Homebrew tab repository that was just updated, and I see a similar formula. Of course, the URL is different, the checksum is different. So what about Gitia? Well, I can do the same thing with Codeberg. There are no releases. And go here and build with Maven. And shows you the model, which has a few changes. Now we're releasing to Codeberg. There are no discussions once again, but also I'm going to announce to a Discord server of my own. The Discord integration uses webhooks. Anyone that has access to the URL of the webhook can post messages, so I'm going to treat it as a secret. We can see more information about what JReleaser is looking at my project by saying JReleaser config. And this shows me the evaluated model of everything that JReleaser is going to do. So let's look at that section for Discord. Here is. That's the default text that is going to be sent. And there is a token. It will never display the secret values because that would be terrible. And the next thing that we can do is try that release using dry run. And this is a way for JReleaser to say, okay, I'm going to try everything locally. I'm not going to affect any remote service. I'm just going to fake out remote services. For example, here it says, I'm definitely releasing to Codeberg, but nothing happened. And I can show you that's the case when I go here and do a refresh. No releases. There's no updates. So this tells me, well, apparently JReleaser is going to do the right thing for me. Calculate the checksums, calculated the signatures, and then did something. So let's do it now again for real. And you will notice that the checksums are skipped because the inputs did not change, and I already have calculated those. Same thing with the signatures. The inputs did not change, so there's no need to recalculate the signatures if I already have them. It performs the upload and creates the GitHub, the Homebrew release, and now does the announcement. This is new. So when you go to Codeberg here and do a refresh, notice that there will be a release here in just a moment. We click on that one, and similar changelog as before, and all the assets. There should be a Homebrew formula right there, updated just a moment ago. Same template, different URL, different checksum. What about that announcement? Here's my Discord channel, and there is the message posted just a few moments ago, Swiss time. When we click there, we go back to the release. So of course, this will work for GitLab and GitHub and every other different distribution channel that you may configure. So now I have showed you the same user experience with 3 different Git services. And the model that I use is almost identical within the 3 different services. And I can go further and use this model inside a CI service instead of using it locally in order to create their releases. Say, for example, JReleaser itself, the latest release that was posted a few days ago is released using JReleaser. You can see there's a bunch of we use a different convention for the changelog, but what's important here is that the bunch of different binaries, there are different ways that you can install JReleaser. These things, the original inputs for the JReleaser configuration was the tar file, the zip, the end tasks, and a jar file here. And everything else is assembled by the cross-platform Java runtime support that JReleaser has. There are a few other things that can happen. And the way that this happen is using a GitHub action, which I can show you right here. Workflows, early access, setups Java, builds the binaries, assembles using JLink, and then creates a full release. This is everything that you need to do. Just pass additional settings, secrets, if you want to use environmental variables or a secret file, and that's everything. There's nothing more. There's no more complication. There are other projects that, of course, are making use of JReleaser. Quarkus uses JReleaser for releasing its Quarkus CLI. JFX Central is JavaFX Sim Builder. SDK Man uses JReleaser to release the next version of the CLI. They just posted a release yesterday, so that's February 15. And JBank also uses JReleaser now to post its own releases. So we have come back full circle. You can find more information at JReleaser.org. There's a website that contains everything that you need to know about, or what would you like to know about JReleaser. So here again is what is JReleaser, the workflows and the explanation of what each workflow does and what may be the dependencies or what each one of these arrows will mean in case of, say, for example, signatures requires checksum. And if you want to invoke it using the command line, the Maven plugin, the Gradle plugin, or the Antas. How you can install it, how you can get started with a particular version. Say, for example, you want to use Gradle. Well, this is the minimum setting that you need to add in order to use JReleaser. If you want to use it for publishing distributions or binaries. If not, then just remove this and just stay with that one. So that would be like, I just want to release a library or a project that has no binaries. If you would like to know how to configure it, then just click on configuration and find something. For example, let's find, oh, not that one. Let's find how to configure the Twitter announcer. So just you need consumer key, consumer token, access token, and access token secret. The configuration tells you do not set it here because if you check this file into source control, someone will see your secrets. You may use an environmental variable or use the secrets file. If you don't like YAML, well, you can also use TOML or JSON or use the Maven DSL or the Gradle DSL. Every bit of configuration that you find in this website is performed or showcased in the 5 different formats. So it's easy to copy and paste from one to another and adapt to your project. There's the list of everything that you can know about the different plugins. So Maven plugin and all the different goals and the Gradle plugin as well. The CLI, notice that every single bit of here matches the workflow that we saw earlier. There are examples explaining how you can use, how JReleaser builds itself, or the simplest release, or using autoconfig as I showed earlier, or how you want to create cross-platform Java runtimes with JLink, or a native image application built with Spring Boot, Quarkus, or Micronaut, because GraalVM right now is the hottest thing. There is also a JLink version for Quarkus at the moment. And of course, there are a few other things that you can check here.
Is GitHub action documented here?
Oh yeah, we go here in continuous integration and click on GitHub Actions. And here is how you can use it and all the different properties that you can apply, and which things that you need to keep in mind when you're using a particular GitHub token or something else.
What about releasing to Maven Central?
Good question, Asaf. And the answer is not yet. And the reason is the following. If you're using Maven or Gradle, very likely you already have configuration to make that happen. I know it's a little bit cumbersome. You have to configure like 4 or 5 different plugins to make this happen. But these build tools already know how to do that. Many people have asked this feature, and it's likely that we're going to add it in the future, but not before we release 1.0.0, which should come out within the next 2 months. So we're already in the close phase where fixing issues and not adding more features. If you're not using Maven or Gradle to create your binaries or create releases, then it makes a lot of sense for JReleaser to do that for you. It also makes sense, say, I want JReleaser to perform everything that is related to a particular release. That will, of course, include releasing pumps and jars to Maven Central or Nexus or something else. And for that reason, that's why we are considering adding the feature later. So we're not going to leave you hanging dry. There is a workaround right now, which is use Maven or Gradle. But then eventually we'll find a way to put everything together in one roof. Very good question. So in that regard, what is coming in the future? What can we expect for JReleaser? Well, so we have a wide set of options already covered with GitHub, GitLab, and Gitia. But there are, of course, other Git services that continue to be popular, like Bitbucket and Azure. We may be able to support them in the future. Bitbucket does not have a release feature per se, as with the standard from the others that we have seen. Azure does, and it's just a matter of integrating with the API. And for Bitbucket, we have to figure out what we're going to do with uploading assets or downloading assets. Additional packages such as Winget that will require installers, for which you already have JPackage integration, or it may be AppImage for Linux, or Flatpak also for Linux, or AUR, which is for Arch Linux. These are other installers that have been requested by users. And in the case of Rust, you may use JReleaser to build Rust binaries, but you need a little bit of extra configuration, because the way that Rust thinks about platform values, instead of saying like what Java means, OS X, x86 64, or it's Linux or it's Windows, then Rust prefers to say something like Apple Darwin and have x86 at the beginning, or it's AMD 64. So you have to have a mapping from one another. Right now, that mapping is explicit. You have to do it. In the future, it may be like, I just want to say, I want to build a Rust, I want to release a Rust project. And then those mappings and whatever else is needed is going to be automatically added by the release. And is there any other set of binaries or any other platform that will require additional mappings? Then we can also consider those things. Yeah, I leave you with some links. We saw the JReleaser page is hosted at JReleaser.org. We have the project hosted at GitHub. We have an open collective in case that you find the project useful, and feel free to sponsor us. And of course, we have a Twitter account where we announce new releases and we post news and things that are coming up with JReleaser. Everything that we have seen so far today is open source. If you have not contributed to open source before, let me tell you, it's quite simple. You saw any problem, you see any problem what we saw today, or any other open source tool, library, project you consume in daily work, file a ticket. That's it. You don't have to send code, but if you want to do so, but the very minimum, if there is a missing feature, if there's something that's not working properly, please let know the team at the other side of the wire that something is broken or something may be improved. Just file a ticket. That's plenty of help. We, of course, are open for ideas, and we have a discussion topic for JReleaser in case that you would like to see something new coming up. Or if you found something that is not working properly, then please, again, file a ticket. There is the URL for our issue tracker. And with that, I think that's plenty of content for you. So now you know the history of the project, why it came to be, and how it came to be, and what it can do, the advantage of the project being able to be invoked with different steps means that you can adapt the tool to your build process instead of adapting the build tool, instead of adapting your process to the build tool. So it's not like it's my way or the highway. If you already have a way to create a Git release and you only need platform packages, then JReleaser will help you. If you don't know how to create a Git release, JReleaser will do it for you, and then you can ignore platform packages, you'll need them. Or it can do everything for you. It's up to you to decide how much or how little the tool may be able to help you in your current release process. Okay.
I think this tool is amazing, Andreas.
Thank you.
I think really it's really useful. It's packed with integrations and functionality. I think it's really, really useful.
Yes, I will use a different word. I would say comprehensive, which is quite impressive. Right? It seems like you thought about everything.
Well, we're working with the project for close to a year now. And as I said, we have taken a lot of information, much of learning from JBank and other projects that have embraced the tool, and then given back contributions such as use cases that we didn't think before. And so now it's quite it's stable. So that's why we are pretty much on the roadmap, on the road to 1.0.0 very soon. And we already have ideas of features that may come after. Again, publishing to Maven Central is just one of them. So we'll see how it goes. And the people that are using the tool are quite happy with it, because once you have set up your release pipeline, once you have automated a release pipeline, doesn't matter with which tool. It could be JReleaser, it could be anything you want to. But once you have automated release pipelines, then just magic happens. Now, of course, I will be very happy if you were to use JReleaser, because we have covered many use cases. If your use case happens to be one of those, then JReleaser will be a very good fit for you. If it's not covered, then please let us know and we can figure out how we can help you. Or if there's some other additional tool that may be added into your release pipeline.
Andres, thank you. Very, really cool. My question is regarding about more from curiosity about you explain how the tool was born, but I think that something interesting in the open source is what is the initiative? It's something that comes from the Java world somehow, or it's a total individual by you or by your contributors or your team, or it's just you. You just come to some problem and then you said why there is no such great tool like in Go, also in Java, and that's it, and you initiated.
Right. So when Max and I were talking about this one early on, we said, yeah, there should be a tool called JReleaser that should do these things. That's how we came up with the name. And someone should build this. And we're looking at each other like, yeah, someone should do it. And then a couple of weeks later, we came about talking about that thing again. It's like, yeah, so what happened? Well, no one has built it. So what's going to happen now? I guess I'm going to do it. We were waiting for someone to pick it up, but no one did it. And I do maintain other open source projects which have to be released. And I did it before using JReleaser with a lot of scripts and copied and pasted many things, right? So I needed a way to have a standard way to release all my projects. And so that's what I said, okay, if no one is going to do it, I have a need, and I'm going to figure out a way to fulfill that need. And I'm pretty sure some other people will have a similar need. So that's why I decided to make it open source.
Great. And you are doing it for life. So I mean that it is part of your job description in Oracle, or just in your offline time or something like that?
It's definitely on my offline time. This is a full open source project. It's the work of love of someone that says, I need this tool and I need to do X or Y, and I just do it. And the reason why it's not related to my daily work is because I'm working at the Oracle database group right now. And I bring a lot of expertise coming from the Java community, from a Java point of view, into the database. And we talk about many different things. There are many projects. Some of them happen to be commercial and some of them happen to be open source that are related to the database. Releasing a binary will probably be something that is definitely somehow related to these projects, but it's not something that is currently required. So the teams that are working in these projects and these products, they already have their own release processes. Everything is done using their own tools. If they need to publish things to the open, in the case GitHub, maybe they will have a look at JReleaser, but it's not right now. The intersection point within my daily work and this open source tool is really non-existent.
Thank you.
I join all the compliments about the nice work. Question, what does it mean to extend it to other environment like Scala, Clojure, etc.?
The tool is built in such a way that we have an execution engine for which the Maven plugin and the Gradle plugin are wrappers around it. So there's a little bit of work that needs to be done in order to adapt or wrap the engine to be run on SVT or Lineagen or any other build tool. But we have done much of the work already by providing the same thing for Maven and Gradle. So we're talking perhaps a couple of weeks or maybe it's even a couple of days to get this done. It's not like it's definitely it's not starting from scratch. So far, we have not had someone asking for integration with SVT, Lineagen, or any other build tool.
Okay.
But it's certainly possible.
Thanks.
All right. Any other questions that you may have? If not, well, know that you can always reach me on Twitter. Just go into Twitter, Almiray, or you can reach me on GitHub, is surprise, surprise, GitHub Almiray, or just go into JReleaser in the discussions and then you'll find me.
You also support the Docker Hub?
Yes, we support publishing Docker images. You may, using templates, you may supply a basic set of instructions for Docker, and JReleaser will create the Docker file for you, then the image, and then publish to a Docker registry. By default, it's Docker Hub, but you can configure any other Docker registry. As a matter of fact, the two images that we produce, if you look here into the JReleaser YAML file, so this is the configuration for JReleaser. We use the custom Java runtimes. There are 8 runtimes that we built for Mac, Intel and ARM, Linux, Intel and ARM, Linux Alpine, Intel and ARM, and Windows, Intel and Windows ARM. So 8 different one of those. This name here will be important when we see it down here in the definition of the distributions. Once we have assembled the binaries, here we go, comes back again here. And the standalone distribution is the one we use to publish for Homebrew, so that you don't need a explicit Java runtime when you install it using Homebrew. And the same goes for Docker. For Docker, we don't have, we do have custom templates for the Docker files. And this is all the compression that is needed in order to generate what is the name of the image that we're going to push, and additional commands that will be added to the Docker file once it's generated, such that these settings, if I want to, I will publish it to a place called this, JReleaser Docker. And this is the Docker file that JReleaser generates based on those inputs. So we can tell that it's using the zip for the standalone version. Now, opposed to other Docker files, this does not download the zip file and then continues. This uses the binary that already exists in the system. That is because of how this template is done. But there are other templates that will allow you to curl or wget the binary instead of expecting the zip file to exist when you are building the image.
I have a question. I didn't see any building of images of Mac ARM, OS X ARM, the new CPU.
No, Jessica. We don't have that here. So when you probably are referring to the assets and in our release. Here. There is OS X ARM and there is OS X Intel, the custom Java runtimes. But that is because JLink, this is a feature of JLink, it's not JReleaser itself, but JReleaser makes it easy to configure. You can generate cross-platform Java runtimes in a single node for all these different JDKs, because JLink only requires a specific JDK or JRE in order to generate a particular runtime. So as a matter of fact, all these images, these 8 different images are generated on a Linux box when running on GitHub.
So JLink can create an image. JLink is part of the JDK, right?
Yes, JLink is a standard tool from the JDK.
And it can generate all the binaries for all the different platforms?
You can. The trick is that you have to point the current executing JLink to a JDK, the target one that you want to use.
Okay. So you do need the JDK, the relevant JDK in your machine.
Yes.
But you don't need to run it. You just need the binaries in order.
You just need the binary, exactly. So the JReleaser build has a step to download all those JDKs and unzip them in a particular location so that when the assembly of the custom Java runtimes with JLink happen, they will have access to those JDKs.
Yeah, by the way, it's a feature that also exists in Go and Rust as well. So you can build from the same you can build from the same environment. You can build from Linux for a different CPU architecture and also for a different operating system architecture.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. That's one of the features that JReleaser has in order to generate for so many different platforms. Yeah. Unfortunately for Java, we can't do that with GraalVM native image yet. There's no cross-compilation. There's also no cross-compilation possible with JPackage, but we can have it with JLink.
So you don't need to build and call JLink yourself. It happens part of the JReleaser.
But you have to configure. So if I show you how we do it with JReleaser itself, there is one step here. When we build the CLI, this is the break for the CLI, there is a plugin, a JDKs plugin provided by JReleaser itself that can help you download those JDKs. There are 2 versions. You can specify the URL and the checksum, or you can use a FullJ's Discovery API or Disco API to do that. I think this one does it by saying, I want to release from this, I want to download from this URL with that particular checksum. And there's a bunch of URLs for those 8 different JDKs. And when I invoke the build, those JDKs will be downloaded. And the next bit is when you look at the configuration of JReleaser, when we assemble. So one thing is to download things with Gradle, and another is to assemble the binaries. When we look at the configuration of JLink, these paths will resolve to the expanded JDKs downloaded via Gradle. And this configuration with the target JDKs will tell JReleaser that should build 8 different binaries.
So it creates a one binary that contains both the JDK and the jar file.
Yes. Well, it creates a distribution. It's not just a single binary, but it contains a set of files that you can repackage using JPackage or just zip them up and ship it, which is exactly what JReleaser does. So this is a nice feature from JLink. It just takes a little while to do the configuration. And so we saw how we can do it, and we provide that with JReleaser, and then we make it easier for you.
And Andreas, is there a way to like configure in the releaser YAML two configurations that you can choose from Flag? For instance, if you wanna have different configurations for minor and major versions or something like that, is there a way like to pass a flag and have?
Yeah. So you're probably looking at SDK man configuration. There are some steps or there are some pieces of configuration that can be defined using environmental settings. Not everything can. For those that can be set using environmental settings, then you can control the value from the outside. If you happen to use the Maven or Gradle plugins, then you can use their proper project properties to make that happen as well. Yeah, but for the standalone configuration file, it's only those settings for which we have enabled in environmental settings. So how can you tell that? Let's go into configuration and let's look into Twitter is a good example. Once again, every single bit of configuration that can be done using environmental variables has this icon. And it will also tell you what's the name of the environmental setting that you can set. And if you don't find it here, you can also go here into environment. And here we have a list of every single setting that we can set. For example, in the release, we can pass the release name or the branch instead of reading or overwriting this, instead of reading from the Git metadata. We can also set a release as draft or as a pre-release in the case of GitHub and Gitia. Say, for example, Slack. We can set the token or the webhook. So instead of making things explicit in the configuration file, you can use this. But I guess that may be something else to look into the future. If it makes sense for most configuration settings to be able to be overridden using an environmental setting like that. Makes sense probably for CLI, probably not so much for Maven and Gradle because you already have that kind of support baked into the deal too.
Yeah, that's right. Actually, those globals are actually a very good solution for this problem.
Yeah, when you say minor, yeah, SDK man doesn't have an option for defining the type of command, so that could be something that we can add in the future.
Nice.
Andreas, I saw there in the JReleaser YAML, I saw there muscle versus glibc. So does it mean because it's a muscle, it means that I have I need some dependency? Again, because I need glibc or not a muscle, it means that I need to prerequisite a library of muscle before I build it. So who did this for me? So I need some Linux machine specifically with muscle or not, or it's something that somehow JReleaser helped me?
No, in this case, JReleaser will expect the environment, the build environment to be set up properly. So in the case of assembling JLink, that's not a problem. But for running this binary, then you definitely need to be running on a Linux environment where it's compiled using muscle.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah, that's opposed to some other places. For example, when you assemble a native image with JReleaser, we have the option to also compress the image using UPX. You can define the version of UPX you want to use, and JReleaser will download it for you if it doesn't exist on your system. So it hooks into the pipeline.
Oh, this is great.
The same goes with cosine, which is another way to sign binaries. You can define the version of cosine you want to use, and JReleaser will download it for you if you can find it for your matching platform.
Yeah, this is great. It's funny to say that it's something that we did manually in Rust, the cosine and the muscle and the UPX stuff.
Yeah, so nothing to do yet here on Muscle. This is something outside of JReleaser, but cosine and UPX are definitely something that you can do implicit or explicitly using JReleaser.
In terms of user experience, composing the configuration.
Yeah, and just because you mentioned Rust, let me show you how you can have cross-compilation Rust and JReleaser. So I have an early access release for a bunch of binaries that were created with Rust. This is a simple hello world. The only thing that it does is print out hello world. And we have 6 binaries. There's 3 for Apple. So there is one for ARM and another for Intel. And this one is a combined binary, both Intel and ARM. This is a universal binary. Then there's the ARM Linux, and there's Intel Windows and Intel Linux. How do we build this? First, you say, well, use cargo. And I can tell you the binary is simply really just print line hello world. And here's the JReleaser file. The important bit is this. You have to tell JReleaser which platform mappings you want to use, from Java mappings to Rust mappings.
Oh, I see.
Right now explicit.
But it's still, but you don't have in GitLab action an ARM64 for Mac. So how do you?
That's where I'm going to go. So first is this. The next bit is I'm going to create the zip files using JReleaser, not using cargo. And these are the 6 artifacts I want to release. Notice that now I say the type binary. By default, the type is Java binary, so I don't have to specify, but in this case, I have to say it's a regular binary. So what do I do on GitHub? This. I create a matrix where I run using macOS, so you can only run with these runners. But notice that I can generate one for Rust targeting ARM like this. Just the case for ARM Linux that I have to use cross-compilation.
Oh, so you're using the cross of Rust for that?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So just set up the Rust toolchain, compile the binary, assemble the zip file, and this, of course, runs on separate nodes as it runs 5 times.
Yeah.
The universal generates the universal binary for Mac using LiPo. And finally, just release once you have downloaded all the artifacts. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, this is really great. Really great.
Yeah. Looks like this. Check the version number for cargo, build all the binaries, combine universal, do a release.
By the way, I didn't saw there a statically linked binary or not. Does it mean that because did you somehow said that it's a statically the CRT? I didn't saw there if it's a static link binary or not.
We'll have to check here and there in the build. Yeah. Probably not.
Yeah. So no, but it's just a cargo flag. So you can add the cargo flag and that's it.
Yeah, I think I didn't. But okay, I mean, it's just a matter of configuring cargo.
Yeah. I see.
So there you have it. You can also use JReleaser for Rust if you want to.
Yeah. Great.
I have a question, maybe for the people who couldn't join today. If someone wants to contribute to this project and be part of the team, what should he or she do?
Just jump into our project here, and you may start by looking at the open issues, or create a discussion topic, an idea. Perhaps you have an idea. Oh, I want this to happen. Can we discuss how it could happen? Maybe it's a feature, maybe it's a missing feature. I mean, it's a bug, whatever it is, right? There are a handful of ideas here that have been turned into features or added as missing things that we didn't have before. Another bit that is interesting is that the CLI has been translated to 12 different languages. We don't have Hebrew. If you want to provide a translation in Hebrew, that would be great. If you want to provide a translation to any other language, that also will be very welcome.
Hi, Valerian.
A follow-up question on that topic. Do you have some sort of Discord channel or something like that where you maintain a community? That's an amazing tool. I want to stay tuned for updates.
Not at the moment. What we use as a contact point is the discussion page and the Twitter account. We don't have yet a Discord channel. I mean, I guess I could create one. But that's probably that could happen in the future.
Cool. I think I contributed once to Dino, and they have like a very strong community in the Discord, in Discord, and it's a huge boost to Dino.
Okay, yeah, that's something to definitely consider for the next one. Thanks.
I have a question regarding the configuration.
Yeah.
Anything you can configure in the YAML file, you can configure in the Maven plugin?
Yes, every single bit.
And you get the autocomplete because of that?
I like how you're thinking. Because when you click here on Tools, CLI, there is one command extra here called JSON schema. This generates a JSON file that you can use to validate the JSON, the YAML, or the TOML file using the ID. But do you get some auto-completion from Maven? You should, given that it's part of the descriptor. And if you happen to use the Gradle plugin, yeah, you should also get code completion.
I have another question. So say you got the git commit message wrong because you wrote fix instead of feature.
Yeah.
How can you fix it in the change?
And so the point is that you made it wrong and you have already created a release?
No, just I merged a pull request and then I suddenly figured that the commit message is wrong. What do you think I should do?
I mean, you can certainly amend it, but given that it has already been pushed to a remote and you're working on a team, once you do a force push, then you have to notify everyone that they need to update, and there probably might be a merge conflict for someone. But that's just a standard Git. There's no extra bit that you can do with JReleaser. There's one thing, maybe, which is when we look in the configuration and click release and changelog. No, I didn't set here. Let's look into GitHub. What you can set on the changelog, somewhere down here, there is the settings of the changelog. There is a bit called replacers. And here we go. And you can define a regular expression. So this applies to the whole text of the changelog. So when it finds something like this, it's going to replace it with an empty string. Or when it finds a CVE that matches that regular expression, it's going to replace it with a link to that particular CVE, right? So if you don't want to rewrite history, but just make sure that the changelog looks different, you can apply replaces.
Okay.
This is similar to what JReleaser allows you to do.
I think in JReleaser you can simply edit the content yourself, no, before releasing.
Well, yes, because it posted as a draft, which is another thing that you can do here. But if you want to make it happen automatically using regular expressions, then you can use replaces.
What happens if I like to use draft? So how does it integrate with JReleaser in that respect? So there was a mistake, it was posted to a draft. Can I just fix it?
Yes. Yes, because if you have it set up so that when you create a Git release, it will be set up in draft, and you will see it in the UI. You will have the current changelog, which is ROM, of course, and then just click on the edit release and change it. But the next time you push a release, which happens to be the same number, and it will regenerate the change with the wrong information. So you have to be careful with that. For the same version, then you have the problem. Once you go over to the next version, hopefully there are no issues with the commit messages.
So you just have to remember to do the fix and then release, so it won't publish the changelog again or something. No.
Yes.
Just use the draft content.
Yes.
So it's possible to say to JReleaser, when I do a full release or something like that, use the content in the draft release already. Don't recreate it.
No, not yet. No. So JReleaser will use the changelog that is generated locally. As part of the feature of being able to read the issues and labels and PRs like draft releaser does, one thing that we could do is use the existing changelog in a draft release. So don't drop it, just simply append assets or change the title if you want to, and push it as a final release or a pre-release or continue to be a draft. That's something that you do here when you say update. Where is it? Here we go. When you say update, you can define if I want to update the title, the body, the assets, or all of them, right? So if you say body, then you're going to update the text of the changelog. But if you simply say title or assets, then title will change the title and assets will append binaries. It does not replace existing binaries or existing assets. If you need that feature, then it's better not to use update and use overwrite.
Okay.
Well, there have been plenty of questions, so that's been very good.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Any other questions that you may have? You know, it looks like we're winding down. It's almost 10 in the evening for you folks. I guess it's been a long day. So once again, thank you very much for joining this session. I hope that you like it. I hope that you find the tool useful to your work. Please let me know if you use it and you find something that is not working properly, and we do our best to try to fix it as soon as possible. And if you, again, also find it useful, let other people know about the tool, spread the word. That's how we get more use cases added to the tool so we can support more things.
I'm going to use it today in a few hours.
Great.
Thank you very much, Andreas.
Thank you, Andreas.
Thank you. Thanks. That was amazing.
Amazing project.
Thanks.